Hey y'all, my name is Ian Robson. I'm a accounting major at the University of Dayton, and this is my third year being a member of the fraternity. Today we'll be discussing citizenship in the nation, and here are our other counselors.
Hi, my name is Sean Zagarsky. This is my second year in the fraternity. I am a history major, and I think that's it.
Hey everyone, I'm Joseph. I'm a third year member of ETPI, and I am a graphic design major.
Hi guys, my name is Jefferson or Jay. I'm a second year in ETPI, a senior here at UD. I'm a bio major, and this is my
All right, so then we're going to go into each of the individual requirements. Today we're going to be discussing requirements 1 and 7, and then you guys just have to go fill out a Google form afterwards. So thanks y'all, and hope it's going to be fun.
Hello, I'm going to be going over the. I did not need to do that. Share screen. All right, so I'm going to be going over part A, what citizenship in the nation means in America. So in a lot of countries, a lot of European countries especially, there's this sort of nationalism by ethnicity thing. Whereas you have to be born there to be a part of it. Maybe if you're third generation immigrant, you can kind of say you're from that nation, but short of that, you can't move there. You can't really immigrate there and be part of that nation, be from there the same way you can with America. That's because America defines their citizens by holding sets of ideals and values that coincide with the nation, such as freedom, the belief in democracy, the belief that all men are created equal. So that's what citizenship means in America. But the citizenship in the nation, to take it to that next level, it's being informed, exercising all of your civic duties and obligations that you have in America, and making sure that when you're doing them to the best of your ability and with the intent of following through on everything and keeping up our republic that is fragile and can easily be overturned if necessary.
Does it mean to be a citizen in the United States? And now the question becomes, what does it mean to be a good citizen in the United States? The biggest, in my opinion, part of being a good citizen in the United States is being an informed citizen. This means keeping up with your local governments, the state government, the federal government, what's happening in the world of politics, which is part of one of the requirements that you'll be going over, which is going to be homework for next week. And overall, just having a good base knowledge of what our system of government is so you can understand it better. So that's kind of what this whole merit badge is teaching you, is how to be a good citizen of the United States of America. That's through learning about the 3 different branches of government, which is another requirement you're going to be doing. Learning about the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, the amendments, everything like that, which is another important part, and again, another requirement you'll be doing throughout this time. And just overall having a good understanding of what our system of government is and how do you participate in it. And that's another part of being a good citizen, is the participation aspect. Whether it's being as simple as starting off small and going to your school board and talking about issues you see at school, or seeing issues you have around town, potholes not being filled, downed wires, anything like that at town council meetings, if they're open to the public and with your parents' permission. Um, but just keeping that involvement throughout, whether that goes into understanding um, during election time, what each politician who's running for office is actually saying. What are they running on? What are their promises? What are they most likely going to do when in office? So you can make an informed decision. Um, and obviously, the biggest form of participation in our government is when you turn 18 and you're allowed to vote. So ensuring that you vote in every election that you possibly can vote in is going to be another big important part about being a good citizen in the United States. But yeah, and now I'm going to give it to uh, part 1C.
Part 1C. Discuss the rights, duties, and obligations of a responsible and active American citizen. So your rights include, but are not limited to, this is just a few of the important ones. Voting. It's very important that as a democratic and constitutional republic, the system we have depends on us as people to have an active voice. So one of the provisions is we have the right to vote. We have the right to abstain from voting if we feel that we don't need to vote. Either way, we can choose what we want to do with that right. Another right is, several rights are secured under the Bill of Rights, which is, as you know from research, the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, which we will be going over those a little bit later, but just to kind of go over briefly some of the important ones. First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of practicing your own religion, faith of choosing, or to not practice a faith of choosing. You have the right to be agnostic or atheist or whatever you want to believe. That's included in that amendment. So that's pretty important. The right to bear arms, that's obviously very important. It's to protect yourself, to protect the ones you love. The right to be protected from cruel and unusual punishment. That's one that a lot of people forget, but that's very important when it comes to being tried in court. The right to a fair trial, the right to a jury among your peers, the right to not be tried by the same crime twice. That's one that a lot of people forget about, known as double jeopardy. So that's an important one to kind of remember in your head for future reference. And then some of your basic inalienable rights. First of all, inalienable, what does that mean? Inalienable is just a fancy word for rights that are, or inalienable just means it's untouchable, unobtainable, uncompromisable, I guess, God-given. These are human rights that you, as an American citizen, you have a right to. I guess is the best way to put it. There's no, it's not a privilege, it is a right. And I guess the three that are commonly known are the right to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. And what that really means is the fact that you have a right to be on this earth, to be your own person, and to pursue whatever makes you happy, whatever gives you happiness, whatever makes you the best person you can be. Right to be protected under U.S. laws. So certain laws are put in place to protect citizens. One that comes to mind that's pretty obvious is it's illegal to murder people. So it's that's a right that you have to give up. You can't murder people, but that's to guarantee that you are protected yourself from people that murder you. So it's kind of, there's a law in place to protect the right to life. And then the right to be protected under court rulings. This is it's kind of hard to define, but a good example is, and you can research this on the internet or in a book or something. Brown versus Board of Education was a case that the Supreme Court actually heard, and what this basically meant, what it came to was that you, as an American citizen, have a right to education. You have a right to any school of your choice that you can afford. And you can't be discriminated on the grounds of race, religion, color, creed, you name it. If you want to go to a certain school, you have every right to go to that school. And so that's an example of how court rulings, things that are not laws, but are precedents that are set there to protect you. So it is upholding the laws of the Constitution. And then duties. I put voting again as a duty because it is just as much a duty as it is a right. You're given that right because it is a responsibility of you as a citizen to vote, to be represented, to make yourself known so that our system of government is of the people, by the people, and for the people. Public safety. It is your duty as a citizen to report anything that is suspicious, anything that is, a crime. It is also your responsibility to maintain that public safety, whether that is, to safely own a firearm, or is to safely, rely on the police, or to be a police officer yourself. That is your duty as an American citizen, however you see fit, to maintain public safety in society, because we are civil. Participate in democratic republic process. Basically, that just means that it is your duty to stay informed as a citizen, keep your public leaders, scrutinize your public leaders, keep them to task, expose corruption, just basically try to do your best to stay informed, to vote in people that are right for the job. And basically you're participating in a duty for the democratic republic process here by taking this class. You are staying informed and you're educating yourself in the tradition of the American I don't know how to say it, the civil system, I guess, the civil liberties, and learning all about the history of America. And then right to serve, or your duty to serve on jury. That's pretty self-explanatory. Now we're on to obligations. Pay taxes. It's pretty self-explanatory. That's, was it April 15th this tax day? So get your taxes in by April 15th and you're good to go. Another thing is that I think a lot of people forget about is if you're a male and you're 18 or older, you have to register for the draft. There is no currently draft in place, but if there is, they can institute one and your name is already on the list for that. And then last but not least, abide by laws of society. Basically, just be a good citizen, obey the laws. That's your obligation to do so. You as a citizen are given rights, so you should try to uphold those rights, and that's your obligation. So that's pretty much it for requirement 1C. I hope you learned a lot.
Hey guys, so now we're going to talk about the legislative branch and how citizens are involved in that. So basically what the legislative branch is it is the Congress, and Congress is made of the House and the Senate, which are run by a bunch of different people from all the different states. And now when those two come together, they form Congress, which forms the legislative branch, and their job is to pass all sorts of bills, declare wars, regulate everything, or a lot of stuff, not necessarily everything. But where it's really interesting is how citizens can get involved in this. Because at first glance, it might not look like citizens can really be involved in this type of thing. Because this seems like such a high level above us that, like, how are we going to decide who to declare war on? We're just a couple people. But it's actually quite interesting because just a couple people are able to come together and decide if a bill is going to be passed. Like, for example, let's say our congressman decided he wanted to pass a bill that we're not allowed to eat pizza on Tuesdays. Now, a lot of you, or some of you, might be like, well, I don't really want to eat pizza on Tuesdays, so I'm fine with that. But a lot of us, myself included, might be like, well, I want to eat pizza on Tuesdays. So what we can do is we can go to Congress and be like, hey, don't pass this bill. And if enough people vote to not pass that bill, then Congress is like, well, I guess it's really only the senator that wants it. So if the people don't want it, I guess we probably shouldn't pass it. So it's ways like that how we can decide to be involved in the government. And there are other ways too, beyond just voting. We can also run for positions there. So every citizen has the ability to run for a position in the Senate or the House. And when these two come together, that's when it gets powerful. But because there are three different branches, we never have to worry about one single branch getting too particularly powerful. But I'm not going to delve too deeply into that because that is for somebody else to talk about. cut that part. What am I doing? Pause. Now, for continued citizen involvement in the legislative branch is we can also be the ones to decide bills. Like, for example, let's say instead of that one senator wanting to pass the bill where we can't eat pizza on Tuesdays, let's say you and all your friends decided that the only food you could eat on Tuesdays was tacos. You wanted to make it a National Taco Tuesday Day. So you go up to your senators and you're like, hey, we want to have a National Taco Tuesday Day. And that's going to be on this day at this time. And your senator's like, okay, well, there's enough of you. We might be able to get it through. So he drafts up the bill, is what that's called, and then sends it on its way through the legislative process. And eventually, that bill is going to make it to the House and the Senate. And they're going to decide, well, we don't know if we want this. We might want this. We don't know. Let's say no. And then it comes back to you, and they're like, well, we couldn't let you pass the bill because only you guys are the only ones in America who actually like tacos. So then that bill didn't pass. But let's say it had passed. Then you as citizens would have been able to make a bill and pass it, which sediments your involvement in the legislative branch. Now, a lot of these ways can seem pretty small, but there are a lot of big ways you can get involved. Like, let's say one of those big bills did get passed. Then you guys would have made a new bill completely on your own, which I think is pretty cool. America's got a great way that they check and balance every part of the government, and now we'll take it.
All right, so now we are going to be going over requirement 7 for the executive branch. If this will work. There we go. Present. All right, so the executive branch of the government is essentially there to enforce the laws created by Congress to the extent that they see fit. And they can bypass them with certain executive orders and create new laws, as you have seen recently with Joe Biden and Donald Trump, both of them. And that's how they really function. The president isn't as powerful as everyone believes. He does lead the military. That is one of his roles. He is the commander in chief. So he does, decide where we go. He can send troops anywhere he wants to. But there are checks and balances, which you will learn about later. But how citizens are involved with the executive branch. The biggest one is obviously going to be voting for the president, and that's done through the Electoral College, which is a very complicated thing, and it was set up to be complicated. The main thought behind it was so that way the rule of the majority could never be tyrannical over the rule of the minority, a simple majority over a simple minority, like 51% versus 49% of the population could never rule. And so when you cast your vote, you're really telling your elector, your representative how to vote in Congress. And everyone thinks that means they don't have to vote that certain way, when in reality they do. There are laws set up so that they do have to vote that way. But that's a very, on January 6th, they meet to count the election and determine the official president-elect. And then on January 20th, they are sworn in. And that's a very simplified way of explaining the Electoral College. But citizens are mainly involved in voting and speaking to their electors about what they want done with the executive branch. Now, unfortunately, it's very unlikely you'll ever get through truly to the president himself, but it's certainly possible. But the main thing that citizens do with the executive branch is determine the president through voting through the Electoral College.
Over the judicial branch, and basically judicial branch its role is to simply interpret the law. What does this mean? It means that they are not really actionary as much as they are reactionary. The laws will come to them and they will interpret them, and then they'll see how citizens should be treated under the laws or how they should be punished. So it's very much, it's kind of a more passive role, but it is actually, I would argue, probably the most important because it is the last line of defense in our system of government against tyranny. It is the checks and balances against the executive and legislative branch, which we'll be going over a little bit later, but just to preface that. So mainly functions, again, I said interpreting the law, punishing people who violate the law, settling legal disputes, hearing civil court cases, protecting individual rights under state constitution. That's for more of your local court system. Determining if a person is guilty or innocent. So they actually get to determine, how they are, how they view in terms of the law. So that's a lot of power there. And then they act, oh yeah, I already said that they act as a check on the system of government. So some key things to note about it being, about them being interpreters of the law. There are two schools of thought about how a law should be interpreted. There is either judicial restraint or judicial activism. Judicial activism is simply put, interpreting the law through a more modern frame of reference, and judicial restraint is interpreting the law through a more of set in stone kind of absolute idea, and it's practicing restraint on your end as a judge, or if you were the judge, you'd be practicing restraint on your end as you're not letting your own bias and you're not letting your own, you're not essentially making a new law out of an old law. Again, there are benefits and drawbacks to really both schools of thought. I'm not condemning either one. You look at judicial restraint; it's actually really good because it really upholds and it's the purest form of interpreting the law, because you are simply just bare bones, dryly looking at the law as it was written, when it was written, in the context of the time of it was when it was written, and you're applying it to just how it should be today. A good example is, which this is kind of an area of debate, so it can go either way, but free speech. When the First Amendment came out, or when it was passed, there was no internet. So nowadays, the question that's coming up is, do we as citizens have a right to free speech on the internet? It is a public platform. It is, these social media sites, do they have the right to censor people? That's an area of debate. Judicial restraint, people that practice judicial restraint, or judges that practice judicial restraint would say no, because when the law or when the amendment was originally passed, there was no internet, there was no idea of the internet, so therefore, why should that be protected? People with judicial activism would say more so that no, it is, because from a modern sense, our founding fathers would probably agree with us that the First Amendment should be protected, or the internet, your rights as a user on the internet should be protected under the First Amendment laws. So again, there's drawbacks and benefits to really both schools of thought. Neither is perfect, but it's a good idea. This presents a good idea of how you understand how judges interpret the law. And a good note is that really everyone has a bias when it comes to interpreting the law. So that's why you'll see with the upcoming new president, everyone will be talking about, oh, what judges is he going to be appointing? The reason why that's such a hot topic is because a new presidency means that there are possibly new judges or justices on the Supreme Court that can be, that he would appoint ones that are more, being that he's a Democrat, he would be appointing people that are more inclined to interpret the law from a liberal vantage point, whereas our previous president, Donald Trump, would be more inclined to appoint people who are more conservative because he was a Republican president. So again, that's no judge is completely unbiased. Every judge has their own way of interpreting the law. It's just a matter of how much they insert their opinion into the judging the law, because it can get to a point where you interpret the law too much from your own, bias, to the point where you're almost rewriting the law. So that's, again, I think your pamphlet will actually talk about that, where there's kind of that gray line with interpreting the law. It can get to a point where you might be rewriting the law if you're if you're not paying attention to your own bias. So that's good stuff to remember. Let's see here. There are essentially there are three main levels to our justice system. There's the local level, which is District Court of Appeals. There is the kind of intermediate, which is Circuit Court of Appeals. And then, of course, there's the highest one, which is Supreme Court, which you just heard me talk about. District is the biggest because there's the most of them, because there's the most local counties and all that. That is where you have your civil cases, your lawsuits or whatever. They're heard at that level. If a lawsuit gets really out of hand, like a class action lawsuit, sometimes that can be appealed up to the Circuit Court of Appeals, and they'll hear that. And then if it gets really out of hand, if it gets really, it can be appealed up to the Supreme Court, which they, a key thing to note is that the higher up you are, if you're a judge, the higher up you are in the system of our judicial system, the less you have a say as far as what you're hearing, because it's being appealed to you. Supreme Court does not choose to hear. I mean, they can choose if they're presented with a case, but they cannot go out and actively say, hey, we want to hear this case. Let's take this local case out of its. No, they can't do that. They can only interpret cases that are brought to them. Again, that's a way, that's actually a system of a way to protect us from the judicial branch getting too powerful with their way of interpreting and judging the law. What else? Basically, citizen involvement, it says here, explain how citizens are involved in each branch. We as citizens, how our involvement is, we can either serve on the jury, or the other form of involvement is we have a right to be heard and to be to present our case in court. We live in a country where we are innocent until proven guilty, so we should enjoy that right. So you as an American citizen, your involvement in the judicial branch is simply that you can be, your opinion can be heard, and you can defend yourself in court from wrongful incrimination or wrongful conviction. And then on the other side, of course, you have an obligation and a duty to serve jury duty, so that your fellow citizen who is being presenting their case to court, they can rely on you. So it's a good way to really ensure that we have a transparent system in our form of government. And that's pretty much about it. So hope you learned a lot once again, and just feel free to take notes.
Here we go. So now that we just talked about how citizens are involved in each branch of the government, we're going to be talking about the checks and balances of each branch of government. Checks and balances are a very important part of our governmental system, as they're basically a way to limit each of the branches' powers, so no one branch has too much power over the others and becomes tyrannical. So starting off with the legislative branch has powers to create laws, but the executive branch has the power to veto the laws, thus the laws will never become laws. And then you have the judicial branch, which has the power to deem laws to be unconstitutional, and thus destroys the law after it has been created. Now, the executive has several checks in its power. For one, the executive can create federal agencies, but the heads of those agencies have to be approved by the legislative branch. So, for example, say the president wants to nominate a specific person to be part of the Department of Defense, to be the head of the Department of Defense. The legislative branch has to approve of that nomination before that person can be the head of the Department of Defense. The legislative branch also limits the executive's power through the veto. So while a member of the executive branch can veto an existing law with 2/3 support, the legislative branch can basically override that veto and thus still create the existing law into law. The executive also has power to create executive orders, which are somewhat like laws, except they aren't created by the legislative branch and they have a little bit of a less power. Now, the judicial branch can deem these executive orders unconstitutional and stop them, as well as the legislative can limit the power that the executive orders have. Finally, a member of the executive can be impeached if they are deemed to be unfit to serve in office or have done something unethical or immoral while in office. And the legislative will vote to suspend the executive branch, the member of the executive branch, and terminate them from the position. So far, there has been 4 major impeachments in the United States history. And finally, the judicial branch. So while the judicial branch kind of stands aside from everything, it is limited by the fact that the executive branch has to nominate a judicial member to become part of the judicial branch, whether that is in the highest court, the Supreme Court, or whether that's in federal courts, Court of Appeals, anything like that. All members of those courts are appointed by the executive branch. And just like the department heads, those appointments have to be confirmed by the legislative branch. Along with that, the legislative also has power to impeach a member of the judicial branch, whether they, again, practice in immoral or unethical situations, or if they are no longer fit to serve in their office. This is especially the case, or could be especially the case for members of the Supreme Court who serve as a life sentence. So yeah, that's a little bit about checks and balances of the government, and that's going to be the end of the merit badge for today. So I want to thank everybody for watching, and have a good day. And we'll be going over homework shortly. So thanks everybody for watching this video. So the next step will be to fill out the Google form. That is how you got to this video. And I know it can be a little upsetting, but there is homework that we have to assign for this class. So there'll be 2 requirements that you have to do for homework. Those requirements will be requirement 2 and requirement 3. At the bottom of the Google form, there'll be more information about each one, but just for a little simplicity, just so you guys know, requirement 2 is you were only required to do 2 of the following sub-requirements due to the pandemic that is currently happening and a lot of places being closed. If you have previously visited one of the sites listed, please answer the questions given normally. If not, please look online for virtual tours of the areas. And if that still becomes a problem, please contact us, telling us your situation. So requirement 2A is visit a place that is listed as National Historical Landmark or that is on the National Register of Historic Places. Explain what you learned about the landmark or site and what you found interesting about it. Requirement 2B, tour your state capitol building or the U.S. Capitol. Explain what you learned about the Capitol, its functions, and the history. Requirement 2C, tour a federal facility, explaining what you saw there and what you learned about its function and in the local community and how it serves the overall nation. Or requirement 2D, choose a national monument that interests you using books, brochures, the internet with your parents' permission, and other resources. Find out more about the monument, explain what you learned, and explain why the monument is important for this country's citizens. So if you can please, we prefer that you type them out. If that is not possible, please write out the requirements, about 3-4 sentences for each requirement. And then once you are done with those, please email them to my email, which is Robson, ROBSON, I1 UDAYTON.edu, or the email that you received this video from, with those requirements, along with requirement 3. If possible, it would also be helpful if you could fill them out in the workbook, which if you just Google Citizenship in the Nation workbook, there is a free online version of a workbook that you can fill out and do it there. Again, if that's impossible, you can write it out. That's perfectly fine. Just take a picture of it and send it to that email. But if you type it out, please either use Word or Google or that sheet, save it, and then email it to us. Now for requirement 3. Please watch any major credible news station or read the front page of a major credible newspaper for 5 days in a row. It might be helpful to discuss with your parents how best to do this, especially news stations if you're going to be watching them on television, as there's a lot of them out there, and your parents may know a little bit better on what's best to do. For the reading, you can also do the reading online. Via the newspaper's website if you can't get a physical copy. So yes, discuss the national issues you learned about over those 5 days. And after watching or reading the news for 5 days in a row, please explain one of the issues and how it affects you and your family. Again, please have this written out and then submit what you have, either written or typed, to my email. Once you're done, so I can have a nice, being able to keep track of everybody who's completed these requirements. So please have them done by the next class. I know it's going to be a little bit difficult to visit places as a requirement 2, but do your best. If you can't, we will be giving partials for this, but yeah, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this first of 3 sessions, and hope you'll join us on February 6th for our Q&A if you have any questions about either the merit badge or the homework or anything like that. We'd be more than happy to talk to you guys. So thanks, y'all, and have a good day.